Berlin has developed a highly complex transportation infrastructure providing very diverse modes of urban mobility. 979 bridges cross 197 kilometers of inner-city waterways, 5,334 kilometers of roads run through Berlin, of which 73 kilometers are motorways. Long-distance rail lines connect Berlin with all of the major cities of Germany and with many cities in neighboring European countries. Regional rail lines provide access to the surrounding regions of Brandenburg and to the Baltic Sea. Road transport. In 2006, 1.416 million motor vehicles were registered in the city, with 416 vehicles per 1,000 inhabitants. Berlin as a German state and as a major European city has one of the lowest numbers of cars per capita. Autobahn Berlin is linked to the rest of Germany and neighboring countries by the country's Autobahn network, including the A2 to Hanover and the Ruhr area, with links to Frankfurt am Main and western Germany. A9 to Leipzig, Nuremberg and Munich, with links to Frankfurt am Main and southern Germany. A11 to Stettin, with links to northeast Germany and Poland. A12 to Frankfurt, with links to Poland. A13 to Dresden, with links to Poland and the Czech Republic. A24 to Hamburg, with links to Rostock in northwest Germany. All of these autobahn terminate at the A10 Berliner Ring, a 196-kilometer-long autobahn that encircles the city at some distance from the center, and largely in the surrounding state of Brandenburg. Central Berlin is connected to the A10 by several shorter autobahns: A111 to the northwest, A113 to the southeast, A114 to the north, A115 to the southwest. The A111, A113 and A115 connect with the A100 Berliner Stadtring, an autobahn that forms a half-circle to the west of the inner city, and is one of the busiest motorways in Germany. There are plans to extend this motorway to form a full circle around the inner city. Cycling Berlin is known for its highly developed bike lane system. Around 1,500,000 daily rides account for 13% of total traffic in 2008. The Senate of Berlin aims to increase the number to 18 to 20% of city traffic by the year 2025. Riders have access to 620 kilometers of bike paths, including some 150 kilometers of mandatory bicycle paths, 190 kilometers of off-road bicycle routes, 60 kilometers of bike lanes on the roads, 70 kilometers of shared bus lanes which are also open to bicyclists, 100 kilometers of combined pedestrian bike paths and 50 kilometers of marked bike lanes on sidewalks. A system of bike-sharing stations across the city center is being implemented by Deutsche Bahn since 2011, starting in Prenzlauer Berg and Mitte. The Berlin-Copenhagen cycle route is a 630 kilometers long-distance cycling route that connects the German and Danish capital cities. The German portion of the route, between Berlin and Rostock, is approximately 370 kilometers. The Danish portion, between Gedser and Copenhagen, is approximately 260 kilometers. From Rostock to Gedser, cyclists must take a ferry. Water transport. Berlin is linked to the Baltic Sea, the North Sea, and the River Rhine by an extensive network of rivers, lakes and canals. An equally extensive network of waterways exists within the city boundaries, providing local access and various shortcuts. The waterways accommodate a mixture of commercial traffic, sightseeing tour boats, ferries and a large fleet of private leisure boats. Waterways Berlin city center is located on the river Spree, which runs roughly east to west across the city. The river Dahme joins the Spree at Köpenick, in the city's eastern suburbs. At Spandau, the Spree joins the river Havel, which flows roughly north to south along the city's western boundary, to both east and west of the center of Berlin. All three of these rivers flow through substantial chains of lakes. These include the Tegernsee and Großer Wannsee to the west, and the Muggelsee, Langer See, Seddensee in Süden Sea to the east. The Elbe-Havel Canal links the river Havel downstream of Spandau with both the river Elbe, which flows into the North Sea at Hamburg, and with the Mittelland Canal, which stretches across Germany to a network of canals that provide a link to the river Rhine. Both the Oder-Havel and Oder-Spree canals provide routes from the Berlin area to the river Oder, which flows into the Baltic Sea near Szczecin and provides links to Poland. The Oder-Havel Canal links with the river Havel north of Spandau, whilst the Oder-Spree Canal links with the river Dahme east of Köpenick. The most important canals within Berlin run roughly east to west between the rivers Spree and Havel. The canal system to the north of the Spree begins with the Berlin-Spandau Ship Canal, which runs from the Spree near the Hauptbahnhof to the river Havel above Spandau. The Westhafen Canal and the Charlottenburg Canal, both near Charlottenburg, provide further connections between the Berlin-Spandau Ship Canal and the river Spree. The main canal to the south of the Spree is the Teltow Canal, which runs from the Dahme south of Köpenick through the southern part of Berlin to an arm of the Havel just east of Potsdam. A shorter canal, the Landwehr Canal, parallels the Spree through the center of Berlin. It begins at the Spree between Treptow and Kreuzberg and rejoins the Spree in Charlottenburg. The Neukölln Ship Canal connects the Landwehr Canal with the Teltow Canal, while the Britz Canal connects the Teltow Canal with the Spree at Baumschulenweg. Whilst not within Berlin, the existence of the city and its partition led to the construction of the Havel Canal in 1951–2. This canal provides an alternative route between Hennigsdorf and Peretz, both then in East Germany, and avoids the stretch of the river Havel that was under the political control of West Berlin. Ports. Berlin's largest port is the Westhafen in Moabit, with an area of 173,000 square meters. It lies at the intersection of the Berlin-Spandau Ship Canal and the Westhafen Canal. It handles the shipping of grain and piston heavy goods. The Südhafen, which actually lies along the Havel in Spandau, in far western Berlin, covers an area of about 103,000 square meters and also handles the shipping of piston heavy goods. The Osthafen, with an area of 57,500 square meters, lies along the Spree in Friedrichshain. The Hafen Neukölln, with only 19,000 square meters, is located along the Neuköllner Ship Canal in Neukölln. It handles the shipping of building materials. Sightseeing boats operate on the central section of the river Spree and its adjoining waterways on a frequent basis. Common tours operated include short tours on the river Spree in the city center, and a 3-hour circuit of the city center via the river Spree in the Landwehr Canal. Other sightseeing boats operate on the various lakes to the east and west of Berlin. Several ferry services operate on and across Berlin's waterways. Public transport. Berlin's local public transport network is under the regional transit authority named Verkehrsverbund Berlin-Brandenburg, a common undertaking of the two federal states Berlin and Brandenburg, plus the counties and cities of the land of Brandenburg. The VBB is the planning authority for regional transport, awards service contracts to private and public companies, and sets the tariffs for transport lines and networks which do not pass a county's borders. The locality is responsible. This means also that the city-state of Berlin is the sole authority to award service contracts for networks and lines which do not pass beyond the city limits, but has to come to an agreement with the surrounding land Brandenburg for regional rail and bus transport, i.e. the S-Bahn and regional trains. The city's transit networks consists of several separate networks, with heavy and light rail transport with 5 different and incompatible electrification systems. These include the U-Bahn and S-Bahn urban rail systems, regional railway services, a tramway system, a bus network and a number of ferry services. There are a large number of common interchange stations between the different modes. All these services are, as explained above, under the common public transport tariff run by the Verkehrsverband Berlin-Brandenburg. This covers the city of Berlin and approximately 15 kilometers beyond the city boundaries. The area is split into 3 zones. Zone A is the central parts of the city, and Zone B is the outer parts of Berlin city. Zone C covers an area beyond the city boundaries. Ticket fares have a slight price difference between these 3 zones. For instance, in June 2012, a one-day ticket for Zone A plus B was priced at €6.30. A Zone B plus C one-day travel ticket was €6.60. And for all 3 zones A plus B plus C, the price was €6.80. Railways. Berlin Railways from 1846 to 1896 and the successive nationalization. U-Bahn. The U-Bahn is an urban rapid transit rail system, and is entirely within the city borders. Whilst the majority of the system is underground, significant sections operate on elevated tracks or at street level. It is operated by the Berliner Verkehrsbetriebe, the city-owned municipal transport operator, and uses the common public transport tariff managed by the Verkehrsverband Berlin-Brandenburg. The U-Bahn now comprises 9 lines with 173 stations and a total length of 147 kilometers. Trains run every 2 to 5 minutes during peak hours, every 5 minutes for the rest of the day, and every 10 minutes in the evening and on Sunday. They travel 132 million kilometers, carrying 400 million passengers over the year. The first line of the U-Bahn opened in 1902, and construction has continued spasmodically since then, with the most recent line opening in 2009. The first 4 lines to be built were built with a narrower profile and a slightly different electrification method to the later lines. This is most noticeably seen in the narrower trains on the earlier lines, and rolling stock cannot easily be interchanged between the 2 groups of lines. During the division of the city, the U-Bahn system was itself partitioned. One line, the U5, was entirely within East Berlin, and another, the U2, was operated in 2 sections, one by each of the 2 sides. The remaining lines were nominally within West Berlin, although 2 of them passed under East Berlin without stopping, except at the Friedrichstraße station, which served as a transfer point and border crossing. Whilst the city remained partitioned, there was major expansion of the U-Bahn in the west, driven both by the availability of funds from commercially successful West Germany and by the desire to provide alternatives to the East German-run S-Bahn. Since reunification, expansion has been less fast. S-Bahn. The S-Bahn has aspects of both rapid transit and commuter rail operation. Historically, it developed from commuter services provided by mainline railway operators, but now runs on tracks that are separate from, but often parallel to, other trains. Most of the system is operated at ground level, but there are significant sections of elevated tracks and tunnels. It has a somewhat longer average distance between stations than the U-Bahn, and it also serves some of the closer suburbs in Brandenburg. It is operated by a subsidiary of Deutsche Bahn, the national rail operator, and uses the common public transport tariff managed by the Verkehrsverband Berlin-Brandenburg. The S-Bahn now comprises 15 routes with 166 stations and a total length of 331 kilometers. Over much of the network, more than one route provides service over the same tracks, and these routes all feed into one of three core lines: a central elevated east-west line, a central, mostly underground north-south line, and a circular, mostly elevated line. The Stadtbahn carries both S-Bahn trains and regional and long-distance trains on two separate pairs of tracks. This line passes through most of the city's long-distance and regional train stations, including Berlin Zoologischer Garten, Berlin Hauptbahnhof, Friedrichstraße, Alexanderplatz, and Berlin Ostbahnhof. The Ringbahn forms a circle around the inner city and crosses the Stadtbahn at Westkreuz and Ostkreuz. The Nord-Süd-Tunnel intersects the Stadtbahn at Friedrichstraße and the Ringbahn at Südkreuz and Gesundbrunnen. During the East German era, the S-Bahn was run by the Communist state, initially even in West Berlin. As a result, and as a protest against the building of the Berlin Wall, the S-Bahn was boycotted by West Berliners, and much of the system in West Berlin eventually closed through lack of traffic. In 1984, the BVG took over operation of the West Berlin section of the S-Bahn. After a unification, the two halves of the S-Bahn were reunited under the ownership of the Deutsche Bahn. Regional Trains. Berlin is the center of a system of regional trains operated by Deutsche Bahn, which operate to destinations within the Berlin-Brandenburg suburban area beyond the range of the S-Bahn. There are two kinds of regional trains: the frequently stopping Regional Bahn and the faster Regional Express. Unlike the S-Bahn, the network of regional trains does not have its own segregated tracks, but rather shares tracks with longer-distance passenger and freight services. Within Berlin, regional services stop less frequently than S-Bahn services, especially where they run parallel to U-Bahn or S-Bahn lines. Regional trains often continue outside the Berlin-Brandenburg suburban area, but within that suburban area they use the common public transport tariff managed by the Verkehrsverband Berlin-Brandenburg. This covers the city of Berlin and approximately 20 kilometers beyond the city boundaries. These tickets are not valid on DB intercity trains, intercity express trains and international trains, even within Berlin. Trams. Berlin has a tram network comprising 22 tram lines serving 377 tram stops and measuring 293.78 kilometers in length. All these services are operated by the Berliner Verkehrsbetriebe and use the common public transport tariff run by the Verkehrsverband Berlin-Brandenburg. Of the 22 BVG-operated tram routes, 9 are designated as part of the Metronets, which provide a high-frequency service in areas poorly served by the U-Bahn and S-Bahn. These Metrotram tram lines are recognizable by an M prefix to to the route number, and are the only tram routes to operate 24 hours a day. Berlin's first horse tram opened in 1865, running from Brandenburg to Charlottenburg. In 1881, the world's first electric tramway was opened by Werner von Siemens in Groß-Lichterfelde, now part of Berlin. By 1910, the horse trams had been entirely replaced by electric trams. Prior to the division of Berlin, tram lines existed throughout the city, but all the tram lines in the former West Berlin had been replaced by bus or U-Bahn services by 1967. However, East Berlin retained its tram lines, and the current network is still predominantly in that area, although there have been a few extensions back across the old border. Besides the BVG tram routes, 2 further tram lines cross the Berlin city boundary in order to connect suburban S-Bahn stations within the city to the Brandenburg towns of Waltersdorf, Skonisch and Rudersdorf. A similar line operates within the nearby town of Strasbourg, whilst the adjacent city of Potsdam has its own sizable tram network. Whilst none of these lines is operated by the BVG, they all use the VBB common tariff buses. Berlin has a network of 149 daytime bus routes serving 2,634 bus stops and with a total route length of 1,675 kilometers. All these services are operated by the Berliner Verkehrsbetriebe and use the common public transport tariff run by the Verkehrsverbund Berlin-Brandenburg. Of the BVG-operated bus routes, 17 are designated as part of the Metronets, which provides a high-frequency service in areas poorly served by the U-Bahn and S-Bahn. Like the Metrotram tram routes, these Metrobus routes can be recognized by an M prefixed to the route number. A further 13 BVG-operated bus routes are express routes with an X prefixed to the route number. At nighttime, Berlin is served by a night bus network of 63 bus routes serving 1508 stops and a total route length of 795 kilometers. One night bus runs parallel to each U-Bahn line during the week-time closing hours. Most of the Metronet's bus and tram routes operate 24 hours a day and form part of both the day and night networks. Again, services are operated by BVG and use the VBB tariff. BVG bus service is provided by a fleet of 1349 buses, of which no fewer than 407 are double-decker buses. Whilst such buses are common in both Ireland and the United Kingdom, the use elsewhere in Europe is extremely uncommon. Ferries. Berlin has an extensive network of waterways within its city boundaries, including the Havel, Spree and Armer rivers, and many linked lakes and canals. These are crossed by 6 passenger ferry routes that are operated by the Berliner Verkehrsbetriebe and use the common public transport tariff, managed by the Verkehrsverbund Berlin-Brandenburg. There are also a number of other ferry routes that are not managed by BVG and do not form part of the VBB common tariff. These include passenger and car ferries serving islands within Berlin's lakes, as well as a car ferry across the River Havel. The adjacent city of Potsdam operates a ferry that is within the VBB common tariff. Modal split. The modal split between the major modes is as follows. Airports. Berlin is served by 2 commercial airports. Tegel Airport is the largest and located within Berlin, while smaller Schönefeld Airport is situated just outside Berlin, to the southeast. Combined, they handled 22.3 million passengers in 2010. In 2011, 88 airlines served 164 destinations in 54 countries from Berlin airports, with 28 non-European connections. Tegel Airport is scheduled to close in 2013 and Schönefeld Airport will be expanded and renamed Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, handling all commercial flights to and from Berlin. A third, Tempelhof Airport, formerly handled short-distance and commuter flights. It was closed at the end of October 2008. Closure of Tegel and Tempelhof airports is a legal requirement for the opening of the new Berlin Brandenburg Airport south of the Schönefeld Airport site, in order to alleviate noise pollution throughout the city. History: the first airport in Berlin was Johannisthal Airfield, which opened on 26 September 1909. Followed shortly after by Staaken Airport around 1915, known for its two Zeppelin halls and Deutsche Lufthansa base. Then came Tempelhof Airport in 1923 and Gatow Airfield in 1934. Tegel Airport was built during the Berlin blockade in 1948. Tempelhof was the first airport in the world with regular passenger flights, opening in 1923 with flights to Königsberg. Deutsche Lufthansa started its operations from the airport in 1926, while Zeppelins also frequented the airport. The airport expanded rapidly, becoming one of the largest airports in the world in the 1930s, fittingly provided with enormous halls, which are still visible today, unfinished though they may be. Tempelhof also had another first. It was the first airport to feature its own underground station. Following World War II, Tempelhof was used as a U.S. Air Force base, while the Soviet Air Force relocated to Schönefeld, outside Berlin. During 1946, the Soviets had reached Tempelhof before the Western Allies. Gatow Airfield, which was taken over by the RAF in July 1945, was partially outside Berlin. At the Potsdam Conference it was then decided to exchange the western half of Staaken, including Staaken Airport, for the needed territory in Gatow. Staaken Airport was then used by the Soviet Air Force for some time to come. In April 1948, as a result of growing tension between the Soviet and the Western Allied occupying powers, West Berlin was closed off from the surrounding Soviet sector. Supplies were flown in for over a year. Enormous numbers of transport planes flew in and out of Berlin every day of this period. The capacity of the airports then in the three western sectors was not large enough to relieve pressure on Gatow and Tempelhof. Tegel Airport was built in the French sector. It was constructed by a labor force mainly consisting of Berlin women, under the supervision of French engineers. Within just 90 days, it featured a 2,400 meters runway, the longest in Europe at the time. Because of special Allied bylaws, Lufthansa was not allowed to use Tegel until after German reunification. Tempelhof was returned to civil administration in 1951, Schönefeld in 1954 and Tegel in 1960. Gatow Airport remained a military airfield, used by the RAF until 1994 and closed in 1995. Tegel, the newest airport, became the main civilian airport for West Berlin, while Schönefeld served the population of East Berlin. Since the smaller airport at Tempelhof is surrounded by urban development, it could not expand. Berlin Brandenburg Airport following German reunification in 1990. The inefficiency of operating three separate airports became increasingly problematic. Berlin's airport authority will transfer all of Berlin's air traffic to a greatly expanded airport at Schönefeld, to be renamed Berlin Brandenburg Airport. The existing airport in Schönefeld will be greatly expanded to the south from its current state to allow this. In fact, the new airport will only have the current southern runway in common with the existing airport. Berlin Brandenburg Airport is predicted to be Germany's third busiest airport when it opens, as Berlin's airports served over 22.3 million passengers in 2010. Frankfurt Airport, which served 54 million passengers in 2007, is the country's busiest airport, followed by Munich Airport, which served 34 million passengers in 2007. Due to technical difficulties, the opening has been delayed a couple of times.